so good. You're so good.
Oh, don't worry.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who met me last night, thank you for the wonderful feedback. That was lovely. Good for my ego. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Brenda Robinson. Please do call me Brenda. Mrs. Robinson has a certain... I was just checking. You do, some of you might be over 25. Do you want me to absolutely shock you? Did you know that the movie The Graduate, which starred Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft, and had a song in it by Simon and Garfunkel called Mrs. Robinson, that movie came out 41 years ago. Some of you feeling a little older now? I know. And did you know that 41 years ago it was, it almost didn't make it because it was considered to be too risque. It was a beautiful story, actually. I don't know if you remember the story. It was a story about a younger man, older woman. Let me see, what's the word here? Affair. A liaison. That's a very nice word, isn't it? A lovely story, actually. I remember at the time, I was 19, I thought that was a really gross idea. I now see the potential. I'm teasing you. Although an evening with Dustin Hoffman does have a certain appeal, doesn't it? At any age, I might add. You know, it's interesting, and I know it sounds funny to say that, and it leads into a little bit of what we want to talk about this morning, but there is a lot of truth in that good old saying, my, how time flies. Right? And you know, time is our most precious commodity, and balancing with the time that we have is just a huge challenge. So that's kind of what we want to address this morning, and give you a little bit to think about in that regard. So I just want to introduce it a little bit by using my sort of metaphor for balance. I always use the teeter-totter. Are some of you old enough to remember being on a teeter-totter without your helmet? You're laughing, but you know, Dr. Francis Cuddy, brain injury specialist for the province of Alberta, has said that teeter-totters need to be changed. Right? And that we will no longer have the traditional teeter-totter, we'll have the ones with the spring in the middle. Because unless the schools are willing to ensure that children wear helmets on the teeter-totter, which as many of us know would be a really challenging task. He says that teeter-totters have not been used all the time as teeter-totters, they have been used as catapults. Oh, I can see that some of you have memories of that. Kids flying off the end, am I correct? A horrible thing to tell you, but I used to get my sister to the top and then jump off. I think I thought I was teaching her resilience. It's a real challenge, actually, but I use the teeter-totter because I'm of the age of having wonderful memories of teeter-totters, although I will tell you the school ground, the playground in our school in Manitoba, Dr. Francis Cuddy would have put a crime scene tape around it. With a teeter-totter, there was a joy to behold. Right? A very long 2x6 on a steel pipe. You know, I don't recall it being attached to the steel pipe. It used to slide, which added a certain element, am I right? And it had never been sanded except by little bums. And there was nothing to hang on to. You just got on, and the person at the back, do you remember that person? They held on to the back. Okay? Everybody else held on to somebody else. So, you know, the catapult thing, there's probably a lot of truth in it. Because if one end flew, probably they all flew. Right? And I remember doing that. I remember we used to get out there and up and down our swing set too. Oh my goodness. Manitoba Hydro donated the poles. And they didn't cut them down first. Right? We had the highest swings in Manitoba, I'm sure. Not only that, we used to hold on to chains. Oh, that would never be allowed, would it? Right? And the goal in our schoolyard, am I correct, was to go high enough. If you went high enough, you could go right over. Right? No governors on our swings. Right? And you know, if you went over, you were a hero in our playground. Right? And I went over, broke my collarbone, But I was a hero. You see, it was supposed to work like water in the pail. Do you remember that? If you spin it fast enough, right, it won't come out. But you know, the consistency of small children's bodies is somewhat different than water in a pail. So I'm not sure where the theory came from. Right? But you know, we did. It was an interesting playground, an interesting school, actually. There were only 20 kids in our school in a good year. Right? I think when we got down to 13, they closed us and sent us all off to Minnedosa, that big town, to go to school. But our school, and I went there until grade 8. And I do have some wonderful memories, and I do have teeter-totter memories, as I'm sure some of you do. Right? But I remember something else that used to happen, and it's always my opening for the balancing act. Because, you know, sometimes at recess, we'd all run out to the playground, and it wasn't to catapult. It wasn't to bump kids off the teeter-totter. Our goal was to get all 20 kids on the teeter-totter, and if you remember doing this, and get it to balance. And you know, kids are amazing, and that's why you're here today. Kids are wonderful. Kids understand what it takes. Right? And you know, the kids knew. Some kids had to move up. Am I correct? Some kids had to move back. There were roles to be played. Okay? With a skinny little girl named Lori. Sometimes Lori had to get off that end and go down to that end. And she would do it because we would say, Lori, okay, go to the other end. And she'd jump off and run down there. We had a great big kid named Wayne. I don't want to say too much about Wayne. I think he was 4th year in grade 8. Well, as far as you could go with, some kids just stayed, I think. Wayne was a big farm kid, probably weighed 250 pounds. Wayne had to stand in the middle. It was the only place for Wayne. Right? But if he would stand in the middle and act as the pivot, right, we could balance. But you know, children understood something that I think today we really have to work on. They understood, right, that in order to achieve balance, everyone had to be willing to adjust. And everyone had roles to play. And that if we played our roles and made our adjustments, and if we worked together, we could actually balance the teeter-totter. And the other thing I love about kids is when you'd achieve balance, and it was it's quick. You'd achieve this balance, everybody would cheer, okay? Jump off and try again. I think that's somewhat like foster parenting. Every now and again you achieve balance, and you need to cheer, and jump off for a minute, get back on, and work at it again. And that's exactly what we want to talk about this morning. And it truly is a challenge. And there's a lot of balances to be achieved in today's world because the world isn't as simple as it once was.